Hello and welcome back to this history channel with me, Mike Dyer. So this is our first video which we're going to start learning about the topic of World War One. World War One is a fantastic subject to study because it's really interesting. It's also a changing point in world history where the old ways really did change into more modern ways that we might know of today. It's a subject that I'm particularly interested in. I teach it here in the school that I work at, and lots of people learn about it around the world. It's also a subject which lots of people have connections with. So really the purpose of these videos is to go through just the basic knowledge about World War One. I'm sure there are many of you out there who have an extensive knowledge of this subject, and there are also lots and lots of videos on YouTube and lots of materials out there which have already been written. Really, this is just a basic introduction to World War One, and I hope you will find it of interest. So World War One began in 1914, and there's many reasons why the war began. So to start with, we're going to have a little look at how World War One started, and we're going to categorize these causes into four main causes. And you'll notice that I really emphasize the word main, M-A-I-N. The reason I do that is because main is the way that we would remember these causes. M for militarism, A, alliances, I, imperialism, and N, nationalism. So that's an easy way to remember what those four main causes were of World War One. And let's work through those in order, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what they mean and how they really caused World War One. So M, militarism. Militarism is the belief that you should have a large, powerful army, and that you should use that army to solve your problems that you may have in a country. During the 1900s and before that even, the general belief amongst most European countries was a militaristic belief. Most countries believed that having a large, powerful army or navy was an important part of showing how powerful you were as a nation. And for some of us, it's quite difficult to understand that belief because it's not a belief that many countries have today. Some do, but for many of us, a militaristic belief might not be what we believe in ourselves. But it's really important to remember that throughout countries in Europe, during the 1800s and 1900s, everybody believed in having this large, powerful military. What this did was actually caused a number of things which helped to lead towards World War One. What you find is that numbers of countries, for example, Germany, Britain, France, would start to build up their armies. As one country creates a larger army or navy, other countries do the same, and we end up with what we call an arms race. Now, the joke I always tell my students is that this isn't some form of running around on your hands. But what it actually means is arms or armaments are building up in one country, and then they start to build up equally in another country. And that other country might overtake the first. And what we end up with is this constant building up of armed forces in different countries. What this can lead to is a rising in tensions. So if we take a look at Europe, for example, we have a number of militaristic countries in the 1900s which are closely linked with each other and pretty much border each other as well. As one country begins to build up its army, the other countries do the same, and they enter this arms race. As this happens, tensions amongst these countries build. So you can see that this is one of the first things that can cause tension to build in Europe, and could obviously lead to war in the future because you have countries with large armies who are facing off against each other. And they also believe firmly that they should use those militaries, because if you've spent money and invested in creating a large army, it does seem rather pointless not to use it. So when you link this with the other three causes that we're going to look at later, you'll start to understand that militarism is really the first step in causing the conditions which would be right for something like World War I to begin. Moving on to A, alliances. I'm going to do a separate video on alliances, but to talk about it first of all, alliances are generally where countries work together for their benefit. An alliance could be an alliance to support a country if it's attacked, or an alliance could be to support a country if it were to attack somebody else. In the early 1900s, the two main alliances that we are going to talk about are known as the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. The Triple Entente was formed of France, Russia and Great Britain, and the Triple Alliance was formed of Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Italy. Both of these alliances are made up of three powerful countries. Other countries did eventually join with these, but these are the countries that we're going to talk about first. Germany is in a particularly interesting position geographically in Europe. If you were to look at a map, you would find that Germany is sandwiched between France and Russia. So because France and Russia are in an alliance with each other, that does put Germany into a precarious or difficult position. So Germany is also allied with Austro-Hungary and Italy for its own protection, but also to try and make itself look a little bit more powerful to try and maybe prevent a future war. Alliances are very interesting, and like I said, I'm going to go through it in a future video because right now we could go into a lot of detail and it would make this video very, very long. So moving on to I, imperialism. Imperialism is something that's been around prior to World War I and prior to the 1900s. Imperialism is the belief that you should create an empire. You could find out lots of information about empires, but to make things simple, in Europe in the 1900s, there were a number of empires. The largest was the British Empire. Britain had many colonies, and a colony is an area of land or a country which is owned by another. And Britain had lots of colonies around the world, but many other countries in Europe also had empires. For example, the Germans had the German Empire. Austro-Hungary was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Down towards Turkey was the Ottoman Empire, and so on. For countries and for people who believe in having an empire, there is only one way to really create an empire, and that is by going and taking another country. So you could probably already start to understand that if one country is going to build an empire, it will probably need to take a colony or take another country. So this instantly puts countries into conflict with one another. For example, if a country wished to colonize another nation in Africa, for example, where is it going to get that country from? It will probably have to take it from another empire, or it will have to fight over that area while another country is trying to do the same. This instantly puts those countries in conflict. Not to mention, it is also putting the country which is being colonized into conflict. It's always worth remembering that when we're talking about things like World War I, it's easy for us to talk about Germany, Austro-Hungary, Britain, France, but World War I did affect nearly all nations around the world, and that's something that we don't want to forget. When you link imperialism with militarism, you can start to understand that while countries are trying to colonize or take other nations, they also have large, powerful militaries which they can use to do this. This leads us on to the fourth long-term cause, which is N, nationalism. Nationalism is the belief that your country is the greatest is the best. It's also a firm belief that you really want your country to do as well as possible. It's also the belief that you should impose your ways upon others because you firmly believe your way is best. This isn't just loving your country, which would be patriotism or patriotism. Nationalism is a little bit more. So if you have a group of countries, for example in Europe in the 1900s, who are very nationalist, that means that those countries and the people in them believe them to be right and should impose their ways on others. Now, if we link all four of these main causes together, you can start to build up a picture of what Europe was like in the 1900s. You have groups of people in different countries who believe they are always right and that their country should determine how other countries do things, nationalism. You have those same people and leaders who believe that they have the right to take over other countries for their own benefit, imperialism. You have those countries with large, powerful armies and maybe navies, which they can use to do these things, militarism. And you also have two groups of countries who have formed together in an alliance, meaning that if one of them is involved in any form of war, potentially the others can get involved. Okay, so that's the four main causes of World War I, and it's really a basic introduction. As I've mentioned, I'll make another video on alliances and go into that in more detail because that's one of the main important reasons for the start of World War I. Hope you've enjoyed this video today and feel free to comment below. Thanks very much.